We are at the final week of the 2019 college football regular season, and this is rivalry weekend. So many rivalry matchups this week. Just to name a few, we've got the Apple Cup, we've got Bedlam, we've got the Iron Bowl, and to wrap up the predictions video this week, we have the game between Ohio State and Michigan. But before we get to my picks, 9-2 last week, which is a great record, and of course my new top 10, as every week I have a new top 10, so here's my newest one. So there was a couple of changes, although it really isn't too much, considering that we're getting closer to the end of the college football playoff race, and it's becoming a little bit more clear who the four teams are going to be in this college football playoff the later on we're going in this process. So my top five remain the same with LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia, and Alabama. But at number 6 is kind of where it gets a little bit interesting depending on where you look at things. If Auburn were to beat Alabama in the Iron Bowl this week, it would get very interesting considering that Georgia and LSU play for the SEC title game next week. So it's going to really depend on what happens in the Iron Bowl this weekend. I feel like if Alabama wins the Iron Bowl, they're going to end up being the college football playoff, depending on how convincing of a win it is. Like if it's by 2 or 3 touchdowns, I'm sure Alabama gets this 4th spot, no matter what Utah, Oklahoma, or Minnesota do in their potential last regular season matchup and possibly conference championship. So realistically, I think it's just these 8 teams with 1 through 8. Wisconsin and Florida are in the top 10 this week, but really that's only because there's really no other choice in the matter, because Wisconsin ahead of Florida is just because I feel like Wisconsin, I feel like they have a little bit of an edge because Wisconsin beat Michigan, and I expect Michigan to be possibly ranked higher than Auburn. At least I would rank Michigan higher than Auburn at this point, because Michigan I think has played they have more convincing wins than Auburn does at this point in the season. Because Florida, I'm really not sure, other than Auburn, like where is a convincing win at? But it shouldn't matter, as I covered just a minute ago. It's really just these 8 teams that are fighting for 4 spots. And I feel like none of it's going to matter if Alabama beats Auburn in the Iron Bowl, because LSU and Georgia are going to face off. And if you're an Alabama fan, you're going to be an LSU fan for these next 2 weeks. You're an LSU fan this week, and you're an LSU fan next week if Alabama beats Auburn, because that is the ticket for Alabama to get into the college football playoff. And you're also an Ohio State fan too, and a Clemson fan for these next 2 weeks. Because if Ohio State were to lose to Michigan or the winner of Wisconsin and Minnesota, then there might have to be a spot for them, because Ohio State has had the resume this year. They've had the resume this time to get into the college football playoff. So the biggest questions going into the committee reveal ranking tomorrow night is going to be, where is Michigan going to be ranked and where is Auburn going to be ranked? Because depending on what happens with the Big Ten championship game, if Ohio State were to lose the Big Ten championship game, or if they were to lose to Michigan this Saturday, it's really going to matter where the team was ranked when they lost. So that's really going to mean a lot to Ohio State for this whole process. So on to my week 14 picks, and this week I've added spread picks this week. So to begin my week 14 predictions, we have Cincinnati and Memphis. Now, in the beginning of the season, I really never expected this to be a matchup that is going to be one of the biggest matchups of the regular season finale. But this is the game of the year for the group of fives, because the winner of this game may, in all likelihood, be representing the group of 5 in the New Year's Six going to the Cotton Bowl to take on possibly the loser of the Big 12 championship game. So I'm going to pick Memphis because I do like Memphis' offense in this matchup, because Cincinnati, well, ever since they did lose to Ohio State 42-0, they have been winning game after game after game. They're on a winning streak right now. But in the last couple of weeks, I just haven't really seen Cincinnati perform offensively that really gives them a fighting chance in this to pull off an upset here. I do have Memphis in this, but I really think that Cincinnati could end up beating this 11-point spread. I think it's an ideal game where Cincinnati's down by 17 with 2 minutes left, and they score a backdoor touchdown to beat the spread. So I think that's one of those ideal matchups. Maybe I'm completely wrong. I think Cincinnati could compete with Memphis. But Cincinnati's strategy is going to have to be to use your running game to keep Memphis' offense on the sidelines and off the field. So I'm going to take Memphis, but I think Cincinnati beats the spread. Next is the Apple Cup, Washington State and Washington. And I like this game to be a shootout because this is the best chance that Washington State has of winning an Apple Cup. However, I think with this being a shootout, I do think Washington's defense is going to step up towards the end of the game. I think Washington wins the game, but I do think the Cougars will beat the 6.5-point spread. I think it's going to be a field goal game. I think it's going to come down to making a play on defense in the late stage of the fourth quarter, and I think that's going to favor the Huskies. Next is Bedlam, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State quarterback Spencer Sanders is out with an injury, but it is possible that he could return for the Cowboys bowl game. And right now the Cowboys turn to backup quarterback Drew Brown. Drew Brown did pretty decent last week against West Virginia, but it was just West Virginia. He looked efficient in the passing game, but it was just West Virginia. And I'm not sure if Oklahoma State can stay in this game just solely based off of Chuba Hubbard. Yes, Chuba Hubbard is leading the nation in rushing yards, but I just don't know if he's going to be able to single-handedly put the team on his back this week. And plus, Oklahoma, I think they're going to have the mentality of they have to win big. They have to win convincingly to impress the College Football Playoff Committee. Because the last couple of weeks, Oklahoma, they have really underperformed. They haven't been winning convincingly. They've been having to survive close games. While yes, sometimes college football is about surviving in advance, you only really need to survive in advance probably one time. That's probably only allowed one time per season. But Oklahoma has survived and advanced at least 2 or 3 times this season. In fact, they probably should have lost to Baylor. They probably should have lost to Iowa State because Iowa State beat themselves in that game. So Oklahoma, they could easily have maybe 2 or 3 more losses than they have this season. But I think Oklahoma wins and covers a 12.5-point spread. Next, we've got Iowa State and Kansas State. And this is my big upset pick of the week. I'm picking Kansas State to win outright and beat this 5.5-point spread. So not only plus 5.5 for Kansas State, but winning outright over the Cyclones. Because with Iowa State being a top 20 offense in college football, I think Kansas State is going to use the same mentality and strategy than what they used to beat Oklahoma. They kept Oklahoma off the field, and they kept them on the sidelines. And I think Kansas State is going to utilize the running game, led by quarterback Skylar Thompson, to keep Iowa State's offense on the sidelines. I think it's going to work out in Kansas State's favor. Kansas State has been one of the surprising teams in college football this season. So I'm going to take the Wildcats to win outright over Iowa State. Next, we've got Tulane and SMU. SMU underperformed last week against Navy, while Tulane, they had a strong start to the season. At one point, their only loss was a 24-6 loss against Auburn, who was then a top 10 team in the nation. But ever since that, Tulane has just struggled. They have lost 5 out of their last 6 games. And I think SMU takes advantage of that. I think SMU -4 is one of the locks of the week. I think SMU -4 is a lock in this one. I just think Tulane, they're continuing to struggle. I think it's going to continue. I'm going to take SMU. Next, we got a big battle, Virginia Tech and Virginia. it was really hard to imagine that at the midpoint of the season that this was going to be a matchup that had a ticket to the ACC championship game against Clemson. Because Virginia Tech, they struggled early this season, but they have momentum coming to this matchup. But Bryce Perkins, the senior quarterback for the Cavaliers, this is his last game his last home game as a Cavalier. And what better way to end his career, his home career as a Cavalier, than to pull off an upset against your rival Virginia Tech and send your team to the ACC championship game. I think that's what's going to happen because I think Virginia's defense is going to keep Virginia Tech in this game long enough. And I think Virginia is going to win outright at the very end because I think that this game, I would imagine this game was marked on Virginia's calendar all season long, considering how close they were to beating Virginia Tech last season. I think this is the one game that they really cared about the most. And I think that this game is going to end up being a Cavalier victory and sending Virginia to the ACC championship game, and as Virginia is undefeated at home this season. So that is one thing to keep in mind. So Virginia +3 and Virginia outright. Next we've got North Carolina and North Carolina State, another in-state rivalry. North Carolina is looking to become bowl eligible under first-year head coach Mack Brown. Well, technically not first year, but his first year in a while because he has coached North Carolina before, and this is his first year coming out of retirement. And North Carolina State, this is essentially their bowl game because they are not bowl eligible this season. They have struggled all season long. But I think North Carolina State is going to beat the 8-point spread. I think North Carolina State at +8 is the pick to go with this game. Because North Carolina has been involved in a lot of close games this season. They've been involved in close games really through more than half of their season. Because they've had close losses against Appalachian State, Clemson. Those two losses, they're not bad losses, but games they probably could have won. So I think North Carolina gets involved in a close game here, but I think they're going to be able to win this close game. I'm taking the Tar Heels, but I don't think they're able to cover the 8-point spread. So I'm taking North Carolina, but I'm also taking North Carolina State at +8. Next, we've got the Iron Bowl, Alabama and Auburn. No Tua Tagovailoa for the Crimson Tide. They're turning to Mac Jones for the Iron Bowl. Now, if you would have told me in the preseason that Tua Tagovailoa was not going to play in the Iron Bowl and Alabama had to turn to Mac Jones, I would have said Auburn's got a big chance in this. But if you would have told me in late September that Tua Tagovailoa was not going to play in the Iron Bowl and Mac Jones was going to be starting for Alabama in the Iron Bowl in Jordan-Hare, I would have said Auburn all day because Auburn at one point looked like one of the top 5 teams in college football and adding that advantage in Jordan-Hare. But ever since they hit SEC conference play, Auburn's offense has just looked completely anemic and lethargic. Some Auburn fans are calling for Gus Malzahn to be fired. They don't want to see Gus Malzahn anymore. So I think that this is going to be used as motivation. I think both sides will be motivated. I think this is going to be one of the closest Iron Bowls that we've seen, at least ever since the Kick 6 in 2013. So I think this will be a very close Iron Bowl. But I do think Alabama will try to win this convincingly. And I think that Alabama will look like it's going to be a close game, but I think they may end up pulling away at the end. They may end up getting like a defensive touchdown. They're up by 7. Or because they know they have to play aggressive. They have to win convincingly against these guys if they want to impress the College Football Playoff Committee. Because this is their only chance to really get a signature win this season, because they have their best win right now is against 7-4 Texas A&M. So that's their best win of the season, which A&M, they don't have a convincing win this season either. So I think Alabama is going to end up winning this. But if Alabama ends up having like a 7-point lead with the ball with about a minute and 30 seconds left and Auburn has no timeouts, it wouldn't surprise me if Alabama tried to run up the score in this because they know they need to win convincingly. I still think it's going to be close, but I think Alabama pulls away at the end. As I did address that I think it'll be a very close Iron Bowl, I think Alabama's going to pull away. Alabama -4 is the pick, so I'm taking Alabama and for them to cover. Next, we've got Wisconsin and Minnesota. Minnesota has really taken the college football world by storm this season. Their only loss is a pretty close loss to Iowa on the road, which is one of the toughest places to play in the Big Ten. Arguably probably the fourth toughest place to play, only behind the Horseshoe, Happy Valley, and the Big House. So this is the game where game day is going to be this week. And Minnesota once again finds themselves as an underdog against Penn State when they pull off the upset. They were a 14.5-point underdog. Now they find themselves a 2.5-point underdog against Wisconsin. But this is another game this week that has conference championship implications because the winner of this game is going to represent the Big Ten West in the Big Ten championship game, and they will face Ohio State. So the way I see this game, I think Jonathan Taylor's going to be a huge difference. I think the Badgers, I do think it's possible. In fact, really don't think it's possible. I think that Minnesota is going to get off to a quick start. I think Minnesota is going to score first in this. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game after that. But I think the further on the game goes, I think the better the Badgers are going to be. Because I think the Badgers will win this game behind Jonathan Taylor. Because this is going to be his last regular season game, possibly in college football. So what better way for Jonathan Taylor to go out as a Badger than to get to another Big Ten championship game and have a chance to spoil Ohio State's college football playoff hopes the very next week. So I think the Badgers at -2.5 is the pick to go with in this matchup. And finally, we have the game, Ohio State and Michigan. Michigan is a 9-point underdog. Ohio State at -9 is the line for this. So I see this game being a game kind of like last year. Michigan has a pretty good defense. And Michigan's defense, it looks like it's going to keep Michigan in the game for a long time. But I see this being like last year. Michigan's defense had a lot of hype going into this game. But then Ohio State, they completely demolished Michigan. And I see this being the case again. I think Ohio State is going to end up winning this game convincingly. Although the big question is Justin Fields really at 100%? Because I really don't think that Justin Fields I don't think he's as fine as Ryan Day was making us believe that he was. I think maybe Justin Fields, I think there could be a little bit of a problem with his hand. So I do expect that Justin Fields won't be running the football that much in this game. So I think the game is going to be really weighed heavily on J.K. Dobbins. So I think J.K. Dobbins is going to be a huge difference in this game, just like he was last year. And I think the Buckeyes win pretty convincingly. I think Ohio State covers the 9-point spread. I think the Buckeyes win by a score of 45-14. I think Michigan will be able to keep it close in the first quarter, but of course the second half Ohio State team is going to end up pulling away. So those are my Week 14 college football picks. Like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.